Hello and welcome back. Today I want to share with you 5 amazing rook endgame tactics that have had a lasting impression on me from my own games from my students, and a couple from top level chess. I want to use the channel to talk about theoretical knowledge, share fun positions with you too. If you're enjoying watching my content so far, please leave a like on the video to let me know. I really do appreciate all the love in the comments and DMs, and this motivates me to keep producing more for you. Okay, enough chit chat, let's get some positions. First position. This position is from a game of a student of mine, Matthew, who is around 1900 ELO rating nowadays. White to play in this position. Black had just played b6, wanting to trade everything and have a drawn endgame. Matthew had other ideas. I remember walking over to his board and seeing this position. His hand was shaking as he played this killer move. Pause the video if you want to work out White's move. White played the beautiful rook takes b6. The rook can be taken by 2 pieces, neither capture good. If rook takes rook, then pawn takes rook, pawn takes, and c7 followed by c8 queen. If pawn takes rook, then c7, forcing the rook to move, rook c8, then a takes b6. The rook cannot stop these 2 pawns on its own. I have to confess, I've never seen a move like this before. I asked my student how he'd seen this idea. He replied that he'd remembered this position here. He knew a rook cannot stop 2 connected passed pawns on the 6th rank on its own, and this idea had come to him a few moves before even. Next up, a position from one of my own games from 2008. I'm playing with the white pieces. I was playing a team competition, and my game was the last game to finish, so me and my opponent had an audience. We were all tied up in the match. This was to decide who would win. I was losing all game. I'd almost resigned twice, but managed to hang on and reach this position. My opponent's last move was c2, and he offered a draw. Pause the video if you want to work out what I played. Okay, I played f8, queen. My opponent took my rook on b1, and queen's up himself. Now queen f5, check, and my opponent resigned. It's still kind of difficult to win queen versus rook. I wanted to show this tactic to reiterate not to assume only looking at the most obvious move in a position. It would be obvious to move the rook as it is attacked and not sacrifice it, but in this case it was actually good to leave the rook, promote the pawn, and then win the queen afterwards. Third tactic we have today is this one here. I've seen this a lot recently in my studies on the endgame, and it keeps coming up when I'm practicing my puzzles and reading books. The exact position, I believe, occurred in a game between Manic and Gallagher in 2003. It's white to play here. White appears to be losing a pawn or having the rook tied down and stuck after rook g6. However, boom, the move to win here for white is rook h6 check. The enemy king is boxed in by the white king and the pawns. Taking the rook is forced. g6 check, king h8, g7 check with tempo, and g8 queen check. The mates follow. This one is a bit of magic, and I really enjoy seeing it every time. I often get asked how many moves ahead can you calculate. It's much easier in positions like this where moves are forced. Rook h6 takes is forced, g6 check, king h8 is forced, g7 check, king h7 forced, and so on. Next up, number 4, and we're looking at a 1 move deflection tactic. White to move. White is about to promote the pawn. Black is bringing the king over to help support. Unfortunately, black chose the wrong square for the king. Can you see white's winning move? Yep, rook c7 check, and black must resign. The rook is forced to take the rook, and the pawn promotes on a8. If the king moves instead, rook takes rook, and the pawn still promotes, making white's task even easier. This deflection idea is quite common, so let's show another example. Here, we have a pawn race. Here, white is a pawn down, but draws by playing the move rook takes pawn. Black cannot take the rook, or the pawn promotes with check, so rook a8. Now, both sides exchange pawns and rooks, and a draw can be agreed peacefully. Rook endgame tactic number 5. I saved this one until the end, as I was on the wrong end of it, and it hurt a lot. I'm playing white, and have been winning this endgame against an international master. Well, I was winning up until my opponent played an idea I could not have imagined possible. This one isn't so much a tactic, but more a brilliant idea, a brilliant bit of creativity. My opponent in this position played king f2. All of a sudden, the white king, my king, cannot escape from checks. My rook is on the worst square imaginable. I can't even sacrifice it to promote a pawn and still win. Just to show an example line, e7, black is going to play rook c3, then e8 queen, rook takes g3 check, then repeatedly checking on the g file, king h2, rook g2 check, king h1, rook g1 check, and so on. Back to the starting position, I went for rook takes b4, as now, if rook takes rook, then e7 and rook b3 isn't possible, as the c2 pawn defends b3, so other moves must be considered. Black plays rook takes rook. Now, actually, e7 loses, because rook e4, d6, and king g1, with checkmate to follow with rook e2 and rook h2. The correct way to draw after rook takes b4, rook takes rook, is d6, rook e4, d7, rook e1, threatening rook h1 checkmate, so king h2, and rook g1, with the same drawing pattern as before. So yeah, I was on the wrong end of this one, but we live and learn. The best players always find the best resources in the position to challenge their opponent. Every move has an idea. Every idea plays towards a specific plan. Being able to calculate lines deep into a position is all well and good, but having a creative intuition is absolutely priceless. Looking back at all 5 tactics today, we've had an unexpected piece sacrifice, saving a lost position, taking advantage of a badly placed king. Nothing that is beyond our capability to learn. I'll end this video on that note. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at ChessMadeSimple, and please leave a comment on the video to let me know what you think. Thank you for watching, and until next time.